She was 40 seconds from saying I do. The flowers were perfect. The venue was full. The man she loved was standing at the altar looking at her, the way she had always hoped someone would. And then her father collapsed. Right there in the front pew. In front of everyone. The ceremony stopped. Guests screamed. An ambulance was called. The wedding was cancelled before a single vow was spoken. Everyone told her it was a tragedy. That her father needed her. That the wedding could be rescheduled. She held his hand in the hospital. She sat beside his bed for 3 hours. She told herself she was being paranoid when the quiet part of her brain kept asking the same question. He had a full physical 3 weeks ago. His doctor had cleared him for everything. So why had he collapsed at exactly that moment? She went home that night and started looking. She found the receipts. And what she found changed every memory she had of her father. Every birthday, every conversation. Every moment she had believed he was in her corner. He wasn't. He had never been. This is her story. Her name is Anna. She's 31 years old and she is one of the strongest people I have ever known in my life. Which matters, because what I'm about to tell you required a level of strength that most people will never be tested to find. Anna had been engaged to a man named Caleb for 2 years. Good relationship, real partnership, the kind where you can already see the shape of the life you're building before you've built it. He's patient, grounded. Exactly the kind of person you root for when your best friend describes who she's with. Her father, Richard, is a different story. Richard is the kind of man who has always exercised control through financial architecture. He was generous when generosity served his agenda and withholding when it didn't, and he had structured Anna's entire upbringing around the understanding, never stated explicitly, always felt clearly, that his love came with conditions attached. Anna had spent most of her adult life trying to earn something from him that he had never actually made available. The relevant financial background: Anna's grandfather, her mother's father, not Richard's family, had passed away 4 years earlier and left a substantial estate. Anna was a primary beneficiary. The estate included an inheritance clause, a provision that her grandfather had built in specifically, Anna later learned, because he had concerns about Richard's relationship with money and with control. The clause stated that upon Anna's marriage, her portion of the estate would transfer to her directly and irrevocably, outside of any future marital assets, solely in her name. Untouchable by any future divorce proceeding or third-party claim. The clause would activate the moment she legally married. Richard knew about the clause. He had known about it since the estate was settled. The wedding was on a Saturday in early October. The venue was a restored barn about 40 minutes outside the city. Beautiful, personal, exactly what Anna had wanted. 120 guests. A ceremony in the main hall followed by a reception in the adjacent courtyard. Everything planned down to the seating chart in the playlist. Richard had been present at all the planning milestones. He had walked Anna to her dress fittings. He had given a toast at the engagement party that made people cry. He had performed in every visible way, the role of a loving father preparing to give his daughter away. The ceremony began on time. Anna walked down the aisle on her father's arm. She would later tell me that he seemed slightly distracted during the walk. His grip on her arm was different somehow, tighter, and his breathing felt off. She had chalked it up to emotion and kept walking. She reached the altar. Caleb was there. The officiant began. About 30 seconds into the opening, before the first vow, before any legally binding language had been spoken, Richard made a sound from the front pew. A sharp exhale. And then he slumped sideways. The front row reacted immediately. His wife, Anna's stepmother, screamed. Guests near the front stood. The officiant stopped. Anna turned. Her father was on the floor of the venue, eyes closed, unresponsive to her stepmother's voice. Someone called 911. The room descended into controlled panic. Anna was at her father's side within seconds, holding his hand, talking to him. Caleb was right behind her. The paramedics arrived in 11 minutes. By the time they got there, Richard had regained partial consciousness. He was loaded onto a stretcher. The wedding, ceremony incomplete, no vows spoken, no legal marriage executed, was effectively over. Anna rode to the hospital in the ambulance with him. She held his hand the entire way. The hospital ran tests. They admitted Richard overnight for observation. The attending physician was thorough and professional. By the following morning, the results of the tests were complete. Richard's heart was normal. His blood pressure was normal. His neurological function showed no signs of syncope, cardiac event, or any acute medical episode that could explain an unannounced collapse. The doctor used the word unremarkable to describe his cardiovascular results. He recommended a follow-up with Richard's primary care physician, but expressed no urgent clinical concern. Anna drove home from the hospital in a state that she would later describe to me as very quiet. Not grieving. Not relieved. Quiet in the specific way that happens when your brain has already reached a conclusion it isn't ready to say out loud. She went to her father's home office that afternoon while Richard was still at the hospital. She told me later she didn't know exactly what she was looking for. She just knew she was looking. She found it in the third drawer of his filing cabinet, under a folder labeled Miscellaneous. The first document was an invoice from a private investigation firm, dated 8 months prior. The service description: prenuptial background investigation and ongoing subject monitoring. The subject was listed only as CW, Caleb's initials. The amount: $4,200. The second document was a summary report from the same firm, dated 6 months prior. It was a financial and personal background summary on Caleb, his employment history, his credit profile, his family background. Nothing in it was damaging. Nothing in it represented any legitimate concern. It was a clean profile. But it had been commissioned by her father. Secretly. Without her knowledge. The third document stopped her completely. It was a handwritten note, her father's handwriting, which she knew as well as her own, on a piece of plain paper. It appeared to be a kind of planning document. There were dates. There was a reference to the clause and the phrase before execution. There were 2 lines that she read several times before she fully absorbed them. The first: delay required. Ceremony must not complete. The second: physical incident, sufficient disruption, medically ambiguous, non-harmful. She sat in her father's office for a long time. Then she took photos of everything. Every document. Every page of the investigator's invoice and report. The handwritten note. She photographed the folder label, the drawer, the context. She emailed everything to herself and to her personal attorney. Then she put everything back exactly where she'd found it. Anna did not confront her father at the hospital. She visited him that evening, brought him dinner from the restaurant he liked, sat beside his bed, and talked about neutral things the way you do when you're waiting for the right moment. She waited 3 days. When Richard came home and had been settled back into his normal routine, she drove to his house. She sat across from him at the kitchen table. She put her phone on the table between them, displaying the photograph of the handwritten note. She said, "I'd like you to explain what ceremony must not complete means." He looked at the phone. He looked at her. His face did something that she told me she had never seen it do before. It went entirely, completely still. He said, "Where did you get that?" She said, "Your filing cabinet. Third drawer. The folder you labeled Miscellaneous." She told me the silence that followed lasted almost a full minute. Then he said, "I was protecting you." She said, "From what?" He said, "From making a decision you couldn't undo. From the money going somewhere it shouldn't." She said, "The money is mine. Grandfather left it to me. You were protecting yourself." He didn't answer that. She stood up. She picked up her phone. She said, "I forwarded everything to my attorney. I want you to know that I know. I want you to know that I have it documented. And I want you to know that we're rescheduling the wedding." She walked out. She and Caleb married 6 weeks later. Small ceremony. 11 guests. No front row spectators. The inheritance clause activated at the conclusion of the ceremony. The money transferred to Anna directly the following week. Richard was not invited. Anna asked me to add this at the end. She said, "Tell them I don't hate him. Tell them I know who he is now, and that knowing costs something, and that I'm still figuring out what to do with it." She also said, "Tell them I didn't leave the filing cabinet locked. I left it exactly the way I found it." I asked her why. She said, "Because I wanted him to know I'd been there. And I wanted him to sit with that." He called her once after the wedding. She let it go to voicemail. She has not listened to it. She says she'll get there. I believe her. Richard had a plan. A careful, documented, deliberately timed plan. Executed at the most vulnerable moment of his daughter's life. In the most public room she had ever stood in. He collapsed. The wedding stopped. The clause didn't activate. He thought he had one. He had left the filing cabinet unlocked. Anna found every receipt. Photographed every page. Forwarded everything to her attorney. Put it back exactly where she found it. And then she sat across from him at his kitchen table with a photograph of his own handwriting, and asked him to explain the words ceremony must not complete. He didn't deny it. He called it protection. She called it what it was. 6 weeks later, she married Caleb in a room with 11 people and no front row surprises. The clause activated. The money transferred. It is hers. Only hers. And the voicemail her father left is sitting in her phone, unlistened to. She says she'll get there. So jury, was Anna right to walk out without giving him the chance to explain himself further? Or did he deserve a longer conversation? And the question that's going to sit with you tonight: if the person who was supposed to protect you was the one building the trap, how long before you would have opened that filing cabinet? Drop your verdict in the comments. Every single one. The floor is completely yours.